So I don't know about you, but I absolutely love it when people give me recommendations based on books I have already enjoyed. I must say, it doesn't happen too often because aside from my mother-in-law, my friends and my immediate family don't usually read the same types of books that I do. So I actually had a lot of fun putting this list together for you, hoping that it might inspire your next read, or even help you get a Christmas gift for a loved one. If they happened to like any of the books I mentioned, then you will know which book to buy them next. Before we dive in, these pairings are my own subjective takes. Some of the connections may not be the most obvious, but I will explain why I see each comparison the way I do. And of course, if you have any recommendations inspired by these titles, I would be thrilled to hear them. Please drop me in the comments below any recommendations you will have. I will be reading all of the comments. Also, I will never give you any spoilers. My synopsis will always be brief and vague, and the idea is just to give you a concept of what to expect from the book. Let's kick things off with The Dutch House by Anne Patchett, a novel about two siblings whose mother leaves them and their father, and later they forced out of the grand family home known as the Dutch House by their stepmother. If you enjoyed this book, I think you'll also love The Berry Pickers by Amanda Peters. This story follows an indigenous family who travel each summer from Nova Scotia, Canada to Maine in the US for seasonal berry picking. One tragic summer, a 4-year-old girl goes missing, last seen by her brother Joe, and like The Dutch House, The Berry Pickers spans several decades and delves into the impact of loss, unaddressed trauma, the feeling of displacement, and also the path towards forgiveness and healing. Both books also explore the sibling bond, and specifically between a brother and a sister, which I think is a rare focus in literature. And without giving too much away, both stories come full circle in a bittersweet and yet satisfying way, and each story is presented in a very unhurried pace. Number 2, Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine and The Cactus. Both feature wonderfully quirky female protagonists who see the world through their own very unique lenses. And though they explore serious themes of loneliness and self-healing, both books manage at the same time to be incredibly uplifting. And I think what makes them so inspiring and warmly funny is their thread of hope in the power of kindness. If you found yourself cheering for Eleanor Oliphant, I promise you will be rooting just as hard for Susan Green, who's the main character in The Cactus. If you want very high-level synopsis, Susan is a 45-year-old living alone with a life she's arranged in perfect order, but then things happen in her life, including her mother passing away, and so slowly her carefully constructed world begins to unfold. For the pair number 3, I have Lessons in Chemistry and Carrie Soto is Back. Both books feature bold, ambitious women unafraid to break boundaries in their respective fields. We've got Elizabeth Zott on one side, a chemist, and Carrie Soto, a tennis player. They both have this fierce drive and resilience that make their stories very inspiring. By the way, I have never played tennis. I know nothing about tennis, and somehow I thoroughly enjoyed Carrie Soto is Back. It's a fantastic little novel. Hi, did you want to co-host this video? Their relationships with their fathers add another layer, highlighting the impact of supportive paternal bonds in shaping their lives. And for readers who loved Elizabeth's sharp intellect and independence, Carrie Soto's unapologetic determination will feel familiar, and equally compelling. Both books are heartwarming and easy to get into, so if you finished perhaps a heavier read, either of those two books will be a great pick-me-up. And next we have Good Material and Green Dot, both relatable, both in places laugh out loud type of books. One is a story of post-breakup written from a perspective of a man, which is not something you see very often. And the other one is a story of a very young woman who is starting to date this man she met at her work, who is married. The writing in both is very smart and witty, and both main characters will probably evoke similar feelings of frustration and that sense of a car crash coming soon. To me, they just had very similar vibe of both books having that blend of humor and tension, but through the lens of complex relationships. If you have not read neither of those books, I would say if you under 30, I would reach for Green Dot. And if you're over 30 years of age, I think you will find Good Material very relatable. All right, this next recommendation, number 5, it's not an obvious choice, but hear me out. If you loved Circe, I think that's how you pronounce it, by Madeline Miller, I think you will also enjoy Hermit by Jade Angeles. Now, Circe is, of course, a retelling of Greek myth from the perspective of the exiled goddess Circe, daughter of Helios, while Hermit is not even a novel, it's a memoir of a woman who, after years in an abusive relationship, leaves London for a life on the edge of wilderness. Despite the differences, both books explore the theme of female empowerment. In Circe, we see a woman cast out by her family and society, learning to survive and to thrive alone. In Hermit, it's a self-imposed exile, and we have a choice to find solitude and healing in nature. And both books capture that quiet power that comes from solitude and the beauty of the natural world, written both in a lyrical and very captivating style. So if you loved Circe, even though it's an unconventional pick, give Hermit a try. I think you will enjoy it. For number 6, we have Kite Runner. If you appreciated Kite Runner, which I know a lot of you will have read, I think you will also really enjoy Brotherless Night, which won this year's Women's Prize for Fiction. I talked about this book in my other video. Extraordinary book about a family living through the civil war in Sri Lanka in the 80s. And the reason why I think you will like this book, if you like The Kite Runner, is because both books talk about how war affects human relationships, how it changes people. And just like Kite Runner will introduce you into the Afghan life, Brotherless Night will introduce you into the Sri Lankan life during the Civil War. Both novels are written with a certain tenderness, and both are heartbreaking. Absolutely heartbreaking, you will cry. And moving on to another set of stories happening during a political conflict, we have 1,000 Splendid Suns and Pachinko. The first I read quite a few years ago. It is basically a story of two women who were brought together by their life circumstances during the time of distraction from the Taliban in Afghanistan. And together in the fight to survive, really, they form this really strong bond. And then we have Pachinko, which follows 4 generations of a Korean family from the early 1900s through the time of the Japanese colonial rule and also WW2 up until 1989. Both books are told from over multiple decades. Both are told through the eyes of women, and both tackle the issue of systematic oppression and about how the nature of war changes people. In fact, the last 4 books I mentioned, if you just read one of those last 4 books, then I think you will enjoy any of the other 3 books because they follow similar themes. Hello again. I had to switch the location and film the second part of this video on an entirely different day, hence different background as you can see behind me. This is because I've realized that half of my video I originally filmed last time went all foggy. Something's happened to the camera settings. I'm still learning, so there you go. We're doing this thing all over again, but we're not giving up. So in the first section, I think we finished on talking about pachinko. Now for the next recommendation, number 8, I wanted to talk to those of you who are fans of the sharp objects. This will come as no surprise that I will be recommending to you to read The Girl A by Abigail Dean. I talked about this book in my other video about books to be read in one sitting. For those of you who have not read Sharp Objects, this is a book by the author of Gone Girl, and it is equally, if not more, dark. We follow a woman who is a reporter and who returns to her hometown to cover a string of murders. In doing so, she is forced to confront her estranged family and her long buried traumas. If, like me, you could not tear yourself away from Sharp Objects, then I would encourage you to read Girl A. It has similar themes of fractured family relationships and of personal trauma, and with both books, as we get to know these complex key characters and dig deeper and deeper, their stories unravel. Also, both have a shocking ending. In case you need a bit of an indication on Girl A, the story basically follows a woman called Lex Alexandra, hence Girl A, who escaped captivity and as an adult, escaped captivity as a child, and as an adult, she's just found out that her mother passed away in prison and left her inheritance. And there are certainly trigger warnings in relation to this book. Please check them out, but this is a fantastic debut, and I have read Abigail Dean's second book. I think she's got another book coming out next year. I'm going to read everything she writes. Hi. Okay, so next we are at number 9, and I'm very excited to be talking about Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owen. Along with it, I would like to recommend The Marsh King's Daughter, which I believe it's called Home in different countries depending where you are and where the book is published. If you haven't read Where the Crawdads Sing, it follows a young girl growing up alone in the marshes of North Carolina. She is very much misunderstood and very much alienated by her current society, and so she remains in that isolation until she's an adult. Her only comfort is the natural world. And then a murder happens in the local town. She's accused of that murder, and so the story unravels. It's a very well-loved book. It's also been adapted into a film, which I haven't seen yet. I'm a little bit scared to see it because every time I watch a movie after reading a book, it's disappointing, including The Marsh King's Daughter, which I'm going to be talking about in a minute. So I don't want the film spoil this story for me, which obviously when you read a book, you create your own story and you imagine what the characters look like, how they say things, and sometimes the movie spoils it for you. I especially don't like when they change the plot completely. In fact, this is completely off the topic. I'm just reading for the first time ever in my life, and I'm towards the end of it, Wuthering Heights, and I am shocked. I am shocked, you guys. I don't know who decided to popularize that story in a way that it has been in movies. Oh, It's a very different book to all the movies that I've seen, to the concept that I have had of Wuthering Heights. Not disappointing at all. It's a very, very powerful novel. It's very dark. It's definitely not a romance. It's got... Anyway, I'm bubbling away. We're not talking about Wuthering Heights today. We are talking about The Marsh King's Daughter. Yes, that's right. So The Marsh King's Daughter also tells the story of a protagonist shaped by a life of isolation, but it has a darker twist because Helena, the key character in Marsh King's Daughter, has been held captive in a secluded cabin by her father until she was 12. Now, as an adult, which is where the book starts, with a family of her own, Helena's life is shaken when her father escapes from prison, and that prompts her to face her past. I don't want to say too much, but if you enjoyed Where the Crawdads Sing, I think you will find The Marsh King's Daughter equally compelling. And that's because both stories center around protagonists who feel like outsiders and they struggle to fit into society. Both these books go beyond psychological drama. They are meditations on loneliness, on the beauty and the power of nature, and on the resilience of human spirit. For me, the biggest similarity is how deeply you become invested in both key characters of those two books. You will root for them, and you don't just want them to, you need them to succeed and find peace after everything they've endured. And both of these books will leave you rooting for these very complex, resilient women who are at the same time fragile and unbreakable. And so for the final, number 10, I have slightly less intense recommendation. So I paired up The Remains of the Day with Leonard and Hungry Paul. They are both quite relaxing to read. There's nothing dramatic in them. So if you're not familiar with the book, The Remains of the Day by Kazuo Ishiguro is a book about an English battler who reaches a later season in his life, and he is throughout the book reflecting on his life and on his career. And then Leonard and Hungry Paul, here we follow two friends who are two guys in their 30s, and at the start of the novel, one of the friends' mother just died, and so he's working through grief and loneliness. The reason why I think you would enjoy Leonard and Hungry Paul if you liked The Remains of the Day, even though the settings of both books are very different in terms of the timeline, because the first one is based in the 50s and the second one is set in the contemporary times. But I think you would enjoy Leonard and Hungry Paul because both books have this very leisurely, gentle pace. They follow these ordinary characters and their ordinary life. Not that much happens. You just slowly get this very nuanced insight into their lives, and you keep on reading. There's also that quiet humor in both books. Lots of similarities between the key characters in both books. They both a little bit clumsy when it comes to human relationships and a little bit awkward. I think both books are great candidates for Christmas presents because it's a very safe bet. They will make you feel good. Like I said, they just very, very calming and gentle. Okay, so I think we're gonna end this video here. Hopefully nothing has gone wrong this time with filming. Fingers crossed. Thank you very much for your patience, and if you do have any amazing recommendations based on the books that I've just mentioned, then please do let me know in the comments below. Thank you, and I'll see you in my next one.